Now, this is the part that I find really, really fascinating, that if you go back to the example of where there were banks and there were things like PayPal and governments, and it became a very like hierarchical system.
I love how you talk about the current now and
Yeah.
the past, because
Yeah.
you're already like in the future.
Yeah.
You're like, there used to be like banks and governments.
Yeah, exactly. So and then Bitcoin came and said, hey, you can just have actually a simpler system where people can just collaborate on how to have a currency, right? Interestingly, you can apply the same technology, blockchain, to other things as well, right? To things like, if you think about it, the internet was initially, the vision was that it was supposed to be a network of computers. Like I was supposed to connect with you guys directly, right? And then this happened, right? That there are these big companies in the middle, the Googles and the Facebooks and the LinkedIns of the world, where I want to connect with Chris. And with the Bitcoin analogy, the thing is, I just want to transact and send $10, or I might just want to send a picture. Right now, I have to connect to my bank account and send the money through my bank, and then Chris has to connect to his bank account and receive the money. Same with Facebook, right? Like I have to connect to Facebook, he has to connect to Facebook, and I'll send the picture. So in a way, it's the same technology. Just like you can remove these big banks and governments from the middle for payments, you can actually do this for pretty much anything you use the internet for. And that's where our company comes in. So we are actually, while a lot of the other companies are focused on the financial applications of blockchain, we are actually building the software that enables you to get rid of the Googles and the Facebooks of the world and be able to actually use the internet in a more secure manner. So we are working on a new web browser where you directly own your username and data, and you can directly connect with people, directly connect with applications and run them. And this is like an example of, so this is the CTO of Amazon, Werner Vogels. He made a profile on our system. And it might look like a very, like about.me page or something, right? But the interesting thing is that just like you can own Bitcoins with a private key, that like super secure private key as I talked about, he owns his username and data with the private key. There's no company in the middle. Even we can't do anything like to stop him from using this account, because it's direct ownership of your username and your data. And so that's like where
even if you guys go out of business, how does
even
that?
if you go out of business, like it's a network, right? Like it's no single company can act. So we basically just develop open source software.
Yeah.
Just like the Bitcoin developers develop the open source Bitcoin software, but the network and the data, like we have no control over.
It's on computers all over the world.
Already. Yeah.
It's out.
It's slightly more, I wouldn't say more complicated, but different than Bitcoin, because we only use the blockchain for security. But then there are other layers like data storage, like where is your data stored?
Oh, yeah. Got it.
That like maybe we can cover that at some other point.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to answer any questions about the blockchain basics or for Bitcoin.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool.
Yeah.
Are there any banks that are starting to take advantage of blockchain technology?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like what I've noticed in the financial sector is that initially when Bitcoin came around, like, you know, just like any new crazy technology, like they were just making fun of it. And then especially because of the hacks, like imagine like the first exchange where you can go and like convert dollars into Bitcoins. The first big one was called Mt. Gox. It was in Japan. And there was a major problem with it. It was like run by, I would say, people who weren't that professional, and then they actually lost a lot of money of their users because there was some hack that they tried to cover up, and it went under, it went bankrupt, and people lost a lot of money there. So everyone used that as an example to say Bitcoin wouldn't work, which is like saying one bank shut down, so the entire technology is broken, right? Like there will be other exchanges, there will be, so, and then interestingly, I would say maybe 2 years back or a year and a half back, the conversation shifted from Bitcoin to blockchain. So blockchain is the underlying technology, and Bitcoin is kind of like, you can think of it as like one application, although it's not entirely fair to Bitcoin, because as you saw like with the mining stuff, that the currency is actually required for incentives for running the network. So you can't really have a blockchain without having any incentives for people to actually like run the system. But interestingly, banks love blockchain. So now there are all these conferences where all the banks are there, and they're like, yeah, blockchains are amazing. And they're trying to figure out ways to kind of like have private versions of this. So it's a blockchain which is like gives you certain benefits like auditability, you can roll back things, and but they just want to have a blockchain between like, let's say 6 banks, not like this open permissionless system like Bitcoin is. And there might be a space for it. Like I think of it as like how there's the public internet that anyone can connect to, but then there are these secure company networks that, you know, large companies operate, and you can't really get access to it. So there's probably a space for private blockchains as well, but that is what banks are most interested in right now. And I personally feel that this also gave banks ammunition against Bitcoin. They're like, hey, blockchain is like the real thing. Bitcoin, yeah, no, I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
Great. Any other questions, guys? Yeah, Chris.
Can you just talk a little more about how the same technology that powers Bitcoin, what you talked about with the linear data stream, also can store my data, and how can it do so many different things?
Yeah, sure. So I think at a high level, so we talked about this a little bit, that you need some party or something to decide what is the reality, right? So in terms of the currency thing, we saw how banks usually say that, hey, yes, Munib has $20 in his account, and we take the word of the bank, right? If you apply this analogy to Twitter, any content that is on Twitter or my ownership of @Munib is basically there because Twitter says it's there, right? Like Twitter has it somewhere in their databases, right? And they say that, yes, the person who logs in with @Munib and a password has this thing, but they can take it away at any time. Like they do it all the time. They shut down accounts, they censor tweets, like they cut down access to applications. Like I think when they bought Periscope, they basically stopped giving access to their competitor and then bought Periscope. So it's like Twitter is like kind of like playing God in the middle, right? Like, and what this technology does is that it replaces any company by this network where you can go to the network to decide what is the reality. So the example would be, I claim that I registered @Munib, right? But now there is a public record of that in a transaction in the blockchain, where now I was able to register it because nobody else registered it before me, and that is the protocol. And now